Hi, I'm Mark Rosano, founder and CEO of C6 Capital Holdings, coming to you from Primary Vision Network. Today we're going to cover our favorite topic, the Primary Vision Frac Spread Count, but first we have some updates in terms of some places that you'll be able to find the Primary Vision Frac Spread Count. So right now, the American Oil and Gas Reporter, or AOGR.com, will be hosting the Primary Vision Frac Spread Count, and we actually have an article out in terms of horsepower supply and demand, which, come see what we're thinking. Obviously you hear us every week, but it's just nice to see it in print. And then the other place that you're going to be able to find us is oilprice.com. So all you have to do is click on the rig tab, and right there they'll be hosting the Primary Vision Frac Spread Count. So here we'll be coming out with this ahead of time. But if you wanted to see the models, what does this look like, please visit those sites. They've been great in terms of picking us up and hosting us there. Now, before we get into where the numbers are this week, we just wanted to touch on kind of the final tally as Hurricane Delta is about to come on shore. Right now, the oil shut-ins are about 1.7 million barrels a day out of the Gulf of Mexico, which is almost 92% of production, with gas shut-ins of about 1.67 BCF a day. So those are things that will relatively quickly come back on. They'll start to come back through next week. So it'll create a little bit of noise in the EIA data just because you'll have production coming back sooner than refiners. And this will create some disconnect. But those are things that we're going to be talking about and looking at to see when some of those different pieces are going to normalize. Now, without further ado, we can go into the Primary Vision Frac Spread Count. And here, the current spread count is 115. So last week, we were at 111, so we had an increase of 4. And when we look at this going forward, as you start to consider, okay, well, where is this sitting? What does this mean? And where do we see these additions? So when we look at the versus last year, you can see, obviously, we were at 382. So we had the increase of 4. And one of the things that we've been talking about was a more gradual addition throughout October. Instead, we saw a lot of that pulled forward, where we kept talking about how we thought the Eagle Ford was going to see more activity, the Bakken and the Permian, and we thought it was going to be a bit more stagnant, staggered, if you will, over the coming weeks. But instead, it was pulled forward with a lot of that activity being realized in the Bakken and the Eagle Ford. So those are places that we think have plateaued for the next, let's call it a month or two. But we think the Permian could see another 6 to 7 spreads in the month of October alone, just to give you an idea of kind of where some of that activity is going. Because a lot of these additions, if we look at where things have gone from that, let's call it on the last 3 months, the low of 64 to 115, a lot of those additions have been in oil. And the reason why we want to make that designation is because it comes down to how do we stem the decline curve? What do we do to try to spend a little now so we don't have to spend too much next year? Because if you don't spend enough here, if you let the decline curves fully set in, then the cost is just going to be enormous to kind of climb out of that big hole, which is what we're seeing. We're seeing some cash spent now, so lose a little now to hopefully make more next year. And then obviously you can watch our other shows, the economy show, the EIA show, OPEC show, to see what we're thinking about, what is that oil price going to be? What is that demand going to look like? Because it's going to be very important as we consider what's happening versus last year. So when we look at the data versus last year, you can see that we get relatively stable normally. If we consider where 2019 was, typically we have a stable growth, slight activity increases until we get to Thanksgiving. And then between Thanksgiving and Christmas, you typically have some of that activity slowing down. We're not going to see that here just because obviously we're at such reduced levels, and guys are really trying to prepare themselves for the best they possibly can into 2021. The bigger issue now is where is a lot of this oil going to go, because we have refinery utilizations, at near all-time lows, which is pushing more crude into Cushing. And if you're not going into a refiner, if you're not going into Cushing, well, then you have to go into the open market. And the open market hasn't been very friendly right now in terms of U.S. exports as we see the next few weeks. So, but again, these are things that are bigger structurally. They're looking at balance sheets. They're looking at their internal decline curves, ways to stem that tide, which is going to really overwhelm some of the more macro aspects, especially as some of them have hedges or they've hedged out the remainder of 2020 just to put them on a footing where they can kind of bridge this gap into 2021, hoping for better days in the year to come. So thanks again for watching. We're going to delay the OPEC show into next week just because we have some new data coming out. The Norwegian strike is now over. They've mediated, so that is an additional 330,000 barrels that will come back. We have that loading schedule. We're just going to adjust it for the end of the strike, and then we're going to just provide some color on supply, demand. What do we think is happening? Why we think OPEC is going to continue to bleed barrels into the market. And then obviously we have our normal, the EIA show, the economy show, and then everyone's favorite, the primary vision Frac Spread Count. So just a reminder, find us on AOGR.com, oilprice.com for the latest in terms of our national spreads, and come to us for the color that you know and love. So again, I'm Mark Rossano, founder and CEO of C6 Capital Holdings, coming to you from Primary Vision Network. Have a great weekend.